two. Check two. Hello. Hello, is everyone with me? Hello. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not on time today. I'm not on time. I apologize. I apologize. I'm not on time. Hello. Thanks for joining me. I, of course, was not here yesterday either. I actually went and touched the grass yesterday. That was kind of nice. I went to good old Mile End in Montreal. And met up with a friend of the stream. A couple friends of the stream, actually. Nashua Khan and Andre Goulet, and also Nick Sauce, who we see in the chat sometimes, as well as his wife. We touched grass. We got a famous sandwich. I was busy making money off my hot Twitter lead. That's right. Yes, absolutely correct. We got a famous sandwich in Mile End. Nashua has an art exhibit going on in Montreal right now, which was very cool. So we got a chance to go over and check that out. So that's what I did instead of streaming yesterday. I went out and did something. I saw some art. I saw some friends in real life, IRL. I walked around a lot. It was very nice. But I'm here now, okay? I'm here now. And I am talking to Jeremy Appel. It was supposed to be at 2 p.m. I'm talking to Jeremy Appel at 2:30 p.m. We're going to cover this Alberta election, which I've been seeing the HELLBERTA stories happening on the timeline, but I've been kind of neglecting to really dive into it and kind of spend some time really digging into what the hell's going on over there. So Jeremy Appel, who's another friend of the show, is going to be coming on the stream at 2:30. At 2:30. It was supposed to be 2. He's going to be coming on at 2:30 to talk about HELLBERTA. And it should be good. It should be very good stuff. Always appreciate talking to you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I made it.
Oh my goodness. Alana, you did it. Alana, thank you so much. Alana, for the 24 months resub at tier 2. Congratulations to you, Alana. Not only thank you, but congratulations on the highly elite, highly exclusive 24-month golden TRRS sub badge. Only an elite few on Twitch are capable of displaying this badge. Alana Nana has now joined their ranks. Thank you, Alana. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support. Thank you. And I'm happy to have you in the chat and in the community.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Is Alberta the Florida of Canada?
Thank you, Blueberry, for the 29 months, tier 1. I think Alberta is, I would say it's more is it more the Texas? I think the oil thing makes it more like Texas than Alberta. But in terms of having like an extremely reactionary rural, I just mean in terms of I don't mean in terms of like a little bit. The extremely reactionary rural culture. There's a lot of Texas oil companies doing a lot of business there in the first place. And then you have some urban centers filled with cool people and some interesting folks trying to do some different things.
You're gonna have good old Rob
who are inevitably
to
drowned
talk you
out
through
by
all
this very reactionary
Learn
rural,
about wet bulb temperatures.
Thank you, Plunger Man. Plunger Man, thank you for the 20 months of tier 2 resub. Plunger Man, I appreciate it. Almost to the 24-month sub badge yourself, Plunger Man. Most important Mile End question, St. Viateur bagels or Fairmount bagels? I've always been a Fairmount. They're both good. I've always been a Fairmount bagel person personally. Both excellent bagels, though. What was the place we went to yesterday? It was this famous place in Montreal that I had never been to. What was it called? Wilinski's. We went to this place at Wilinski's yesterday that only has one thing on the menu. It has this one sandwich on the menu, which is like this little bun. It's almost like an English muffin, bunch of salami, some cheddar or Swiss cheese, mustard. That's it. That's the only thing you can buy there. They also do hot dogs as well, and you get a pickle on the side, and that's basically their only menu item. And they have one of those old school soda fountains with like the syrup. You put the syrup in, and then you put the cold soda water. And that's all. They don't cut it. They don't cut the sandwich. They don't cut it for anybody. And it's always just mustard on there. No other condiments. And it was good. It was very enjoyable. No subs. No. It's the one, you get the one thing. There's the one thing on the menu. I guess if you want another kind of sandwich, you go somewhere else. Oh, that's so cool, Old Dutch. I gotta reread it. I'm a few minutes from finishing the Native Son audiobook, one of the best things I've ever read. The monologue by his lawyer, Max, is one of the best analyses of class struggle, war centered on racism and white supremacy. Really, I couldn't recommend this book enough. We talked about it a while ago. Not years ago, but a while ago. That's what I think got Old Dutch to pursue that. But Native Son by Richard Wright, who was a member briefly a member, like for some time was a member of the Communist Party in America, which is totally just clicked a lot of things into place for me. Like what Old Dutch is saying, clicked a lot of things into place where you get this like understanding of the class struggle and how the struggle against racism and systemic racism and injustice and white supremacy is an essential part of that. I mean, substituting ingredients. No, you don't get any of that. Nothing. Those are the only options. Anyway, it was very nice. But I don't know. Today I was like, I had some work to do before we started the stream. Like usually, before I start doing the stream, I have to edit the Insurgents podcast, which I did when it just came out. I recommend people listen to the new episode of that. And I don't know. It was like I had to do that before we started, and I just wasn't. I think it's like Mental Health Awareness Day or something like that. And on that note, I don't think my mental health was really doing that great earlier, and I was having a hard time like focusing and a hard time getting started, and I was very distracted and was kind of feeling like shit about a couple of things, and was kind of struggling with that a little bit this morning, quite frankly. And but I was like, fuck, I've got to do this work and I've got to do this stream. I can't just like not do anything today. But then I started tinkering, because sometimes when I do and I'm feeling in fucked up ways, I do artistic things. I tinker with music. And so I opened up this file of this like song that I was working on, and like it was like noon. It was like, imagine being Kendall Roy. Yeah, I know, seriously. So I opened up Fruity FL Studio at like noon, like when I'm supposed to be doing the show. And I haven't even done the task that I had to do before doing the show. And then I'm opening up Fruity Loops, and then it's like 12:30, 12:45, and I'm doing these like intricate 3-part harmonies, recording them in FL Studio. And I'm doing that, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm like, I haven't started. And it's like, but, it was kind of cool. It was a fun, sometimes when those moments strike you, those moments of creative inspiration, you have to kind of follow it and see where it goes. I did manage to start working on the podcast thing, and I edited that and got that out. So yeah, lost a couple hours there, but I got Jeremy Appel coming on 2:30, and I'll stick around a little bit later than usual, so try to make up for it. That's what I was doing all this morning, though, when I was supposed to be starting the show. I was supposed to be starting the show, and I was recording these like intricate 3-part harmonies. And I didn't even eat. I didn't even eat lunch. I've got stuff to make. And just didn't even eat lunch. I'm just having my Diet Coke and my apple. I'm having my apple before we talk to Jeremy APPEL of The Orchard. Substack. We all munch on my apple during that. So that's what I was doing all morning. That's what I was doing all morning, folks. And what else did I do? I got some groceries. I walked a bunch. I have been trying to walk a lot over the last couple of weeks, which has like been pretty helpful in terms of like making me feel kind of physically and mentally better most of the time. Obviously, I have good and bad days like everybody else, but I've been walking a lot. My arm is still fucked up, but it's getting better. Like I got this bandage thing. I have like a bandage on my arm because I'm old. I'm very old. I'm turning 40, folks. I'm turning 40 in 3 days. It's a little weird. A little bit weird, a little alarming. Stream character Old Man Rob. I think John McCain's ghost, if I'm not mistaken, literally has an Old Man Rob emote. I know there's one in the Discord server. It's been a whole year since my birthday. It's been a whole year, if you can believe that. It's been 2 years since the birthday that, like, right when my birthday was happening, I was in a war with our friend Steven. I was in a war with our friend Steven about the U.S. Nazi alliance, if you recall. And my correct stance about America being the Fourth Reich was being passed around, and all kind of pedantic debate weirdos were mad about it. 2 entire years ago that happened. Bad World War II takes. I know. Do people want to hear the intricate harmonies that I was recording before we started the stream? Is there any interest in hearing that? I don't have forced people to listen to it. If you want to listen to the intricate 3-part harmonies I was recording, I could conceivably play it though. While we wait for Jeremy, while we're getting warmed up here. The Chad intricate harmony enjoyers. Okay, well, I think what I have to do is export it. Just give me one moment. I'll let you play. I'll let you listen to it. When they all found out about Operation Paperclip and decided it was good. That's right. That's exactly what they did. Okay, just hang on. I'm just exporting this. I don't think I can wear this plaid shirt. It's too... It's a hot one. Oh, great. There's a stain on the shirt, too. Oh, man. Now I can't unsee that. I'm not going to be able to unsee that. It's going to be bothering me the whole day. And it's fitting for my dude shirt as well that it's stained. Okay, let's see here. I think I just have to mute for 1 second so I can get queued up to the right place because I don't want to. The whole song's not ready yet, but I came up with this like whole outro section, which I think is good. So just 1 second till I find that. Okay, sorry. Okay, here it is. This is what when I was supposed to be working and getting ready for the stream. This is what I was recording, and I got too into it, and then I couldn't stop, which happens sometimes. It's just this like outro section. Hold on. Turn it down. That's what I was doing, rather than like doing the work that I was supposed to do in order to start the stream on time. When Jeremy joins, you have to talk to him about his conversation yesterday with the former leader of the Alberta NDP. I'm going to, Eric. I'm going to talk to Jeremy. Believe me, I'm going to call Jeremy out, or in rather, or I guess out since it's in front of like people. An audience. I'm going to call him out for causing this. Yeah, that's right, Jeremy. He calls himself a journalist. This activist who single-handedly cost the Alberta election for the NDP. Unbelievable behavior that this guy would do this. Why would Jeremy do this? This is my question. I'm going to put him on the spot. Why did Jeremy Appel sabotage the Alberta NDP? The audacity. Activist this, activist that. I would like for him to act in a most responsible manner and get here on time. He is on time. It's me that's not on time. Because I was recording those like end credits Beach Boys harmonies prior to doing this. That's why. It's not for any like professional reason. The Susan Sarandon of Alberta. Thank you. Excuse me. And Old Dutch, that was me on guitar. I was playing guitar there. It was kind of bandy. More bandy, that part, than some of the other stuff that I do. That's what we call them. Okay, you know what? I'm going to change my shirt. It's bugging me that I'm wearing a stained dude shirt. I'm going to go do that. What can I leave you with? can I leave you with here? Immediately after said I'd like to hear the music, my mom called me for computer up. Well, you're gonna have to catch the VOD. It's over now, Phil. You missed your chance. You missed your chance. Hey, just 1 second. I'm gonna change my shirt, and then we'll talk to Jeremy about it. Just watch this for a second. Huh? Just watch this. Okay? Then I'll be right back.
It is Art Volo here again for the Consumer Electronics Show 1987 version. I'm with Ray Glasser from Cleveland, and we're going to have a good time reviewing some of the best stuff that we see here at the show. And what we see, you'll see too. So it'll be Ray, it'll be me a little, and a lot of what we see here at CES 87.
Hi there, this is Ray Glasser once again at the Sony booth at the summer version of the Consumer Electronics Show. And we're going to be showing you real quickly 2 new beta format VCRs that are out from Sony that will be hitting the market this summer. The first one is a new Super Beta VCR, the SL300. The main new feature on this machine is a built-in color corrector. It's a little switch right down here that has 3 positions to correct the color of tapes that are dubbed repeatedly. Over here is a little card showing you a blurb about the machine. This will not be a real expensive VCR. It's a low-end machine. It's got a low number on it. But it does have your Super Beta high picture quality. Over here is its companion in hi-fi. This is the SL-HF350, which is the same thing minus the color corrector, but it is a beta hi-fi machine. It's a low-end machine. It is cable ready. Beta hi-fi super high-end audio. Up here is a machine that came out earlier in 1987 that we did an entire tech report on, matter of fact. This is the top of the line, the SL-HF1000. This is the first Sony Beta to have flying erase heads for picture-perfect edits. It's also got a built-in character generator and a frame counter and lots of good features. This is a high-end video files VCR. Here's some controls back here and a little push-button drawer that opens up over here for all your editing. This is the remote controller that comes with the machine, with the 1000, with no less than 63 buttons, switches, and even
okay, I'm going to just do a tweet here and say I'm live.
What you're looking at now is the biggest breakthrough in picture quality for Beta since Beta was introduced in 1975. ED Beta is the word. ED stands for extended definition, and this is an extremely high quality picture pioneered by Sony and the Beta format to give you 500 lines of horizontal resolution. Down here is a prototype machine with a huge ED Beta logo on it, which gives you your high-quality playback. Now, this does take a new type of beta tape with metal oxide, metal particle oxide, kind of like the 8mm videotapes. So it will not be completely compatible with today's regular beta machines. But the quality you can get from this machine will surpass that of broadcast standards. We're still in the Sony booth, folks. We couldn't leave yet without showing you the new Handycam Pro, the CCD V9, which is the updated version of their Handycam 8mm recorder. Here we are, and what you're looking at is the new Handycam Pro by Sony. This is another one of the 8mm VCRs, camera recorders that they have on the market. This will be out later on this year. What makes this thing is so nice, it goes down to 5 lux. That's like half of a foot candle is all the light that's required to make this thing work. It's got a built-in counter on here for hours, minutes, and seconds. All kind of nice little controls. It's got controls on top for your tape transport. It has electronic viewfinder. Got more controls over here with audio and video in and out right on the machine. It's all trick in slow motion by using the advanced and variable shutter speed on the CCD V9. Isn't that incredible? What you're looking at is the CC V9 scanning.
That's done.
And as it's trying to focus on that
Let me
fan
send my link
and changing
to
the shutter
there.
speed, you can actually stop. Look at that. You can actually stop that thing and go one frame at a time. Let's see. Is this how it works? And get that thing in stop motion. That is a 1/2000th shutter speed. That's 1/2000th of a second. And that, as you might be able to see, that fan actually does say Sony on it. Most video cameras cannot stop a fan in motion like that. With an ultra high speed shutter, you can do it.
Sending the link to Jeremy. But did I skeet it? No, I did not skeet. I haven't even really, I honestly have not even opened or looked at Blue Sky. I haven't looked at it in a couple days, probably a week now. I don't know. I don't know if it's for me. Here's Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy.
Hey, Rob. Great to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. As you can see, I'm here in San Francisco,
Yep.
where Jason Kenney cut his political teeth, harassing, pro-abortion activists and, LGBTQ people. And, I'm just here to celebrate the defeat of the NDP, which I caused with my immense political prowess.
Well, Jeremy, honestly, like that's one of the main. Obviously, you're a journalist and you cover this stuff, but that's the main reason that I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted to put you in the hot seat here, because this is serious business, Jeremy. When you're causing the end, like you're specifically causing the NDP to lose elections in Alberta and changing the course of politics in the country, I find that kind of messed up, man. And like, I just wanted to know why you did that. It's kind of screwed up.
Well, I think I underestimated my amount of influence as an independent journalist who has a newsletter on Substack and occasionally writes for progressive independent media outlets. I didn't realize how much power I have, and of course, Uncle Ben said, "With great power comes great responsibility."
No.
Did you know that?
I had never heard that before.
That
no
quote before?
No.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it's from this comic book called Spider-Man.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Have you heard of that? It's
No.
It's pretty obscure. It's no Guardians of the Galaxy, let me tell you, but yeah.
Well, it's just unfortunate that you didn't wield that power with that kind of responsibility. I think had you known that, I imagine you would have done things differently, but
yeah, then we would have an NDP government and it would be great. I mean, we would have woke austerity now. We would be balancing the budget every year, and there would be no small business taxes. And instead of introducing rent control, we would be giving money to landlords so they don't evict their tenants.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we really missed out on a great opportunity to have a
Which
progressive government.
Alberta would have been transformed into a progressive democratic socialist paradise, and if not, were it not for you. Jeremy, let's back up a moment, okay? Jeremy Appel, a friend of the show, author of the Orchard Substack, right? theorchard.substack.com, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah. Great independent journalist you should be following if you want to understand that perspective of Alberta politics. But let's back up here, Jeremy, because a number of viewers here are American, not all are Canadian. Not everyone is plugged into specifically these sort of political trends and currents that have been going on in Alberta. I haven't done really a good job I've been kind of observing it from afar and haven't really delved too deeply into the specifics of it for a couple months. So would you mind just giving people a little bit of a refresher course on this election that just happened and the last couple of weeks of or months maybe of Alberta politics that led up to this result, which you caused?
So I guess it's I can't exactly give the entire history of Alberta politics.
I've talked a lot about the Alberta NDP and their time in power and their mistakes that they made that they didn't learn from, and Jason Kenney. I mean, people are familiar with the basic idea, but I guess just this recent election cycle.
I think 2012 is actually a good starting point to sort of discuss the issues that we're dealing with today. Because 2012 election, so the progressive conservatives governed Alberta uninterrupted from 1971 to 2015. It was sort of like a big tent, small c conservative party whose leaders ranged from sort of more center right, like Peter Lougheed, throughout the 70s, to Ralph Klein, who was this diehard neoliberal ideologue. In 2012, sort of the Wild Rose Party really had built itself up as the main opposition to sort of the more centrist conservative establishment in the province, which was well to the right of where the sort of, I guess, the mainstream in Alberta politics was. They were more pro oil and gas. They were more libertarian in orientation, and they were more rural based compared with the sort of urban PC establishment. And they were led at the time by a person named Danielle Smith, who you may have heard of. And she was riding high in the polls in advance of the 2012 provincial election. I mean, the PCs, again, had been in power for, I guess, 38 years at that time. And it looked like there was going to be a change. It was going to be a change from the hard right. And Smith blew it. There were a series of mishaps in that campaign. Smith said, the science on climate change isn't settled, which in Alberta at the time wasn't, I think, as much of a political liability as it would have been elsewhere. But the big screw up was when one of her candidates, a guy named Alan Huntsberger, who's a pastor, wrote a blog post. He wrote it a year earlier, but it was dug up by the PCs, saying that gay people are going to burn in a lake of fire for eternity. And rather than denounce him and dissociate herself from him, Smith, who I mean, she's a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, right? She's Ayn Rand is her favorite author, right? She's that far down the libertarian rabbit hole. And so she doesn't share, she was like, I don't share those views. I'm pro LGBTQ rights, I'm pro choice, but he's entitled to his views, and I'm not going to denounce him for it. And that was seen as a major factor for how the Wild Rose lost the 2012 election. So then afterwards, Alison Redford's returned with a big majority government, the PC premier. She resigns because there are like a series of scandals no one really remembers now. And then Danielle Smith decides, when the next PC leader comes to power, Jim Prentice, who used to be a cabinet minister in the Harper government, she decides to cross the floor to the PCs with, most of her Wild Rose caucus. I didn't live in Alberta at the time. I was living in Ontario, and I was, watching the news. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, the opposition just crossed the floor to the government, en masse. And that was sort of an early attempt at sort of uniting the right in Alberta, but it was disaster. Smith didn't even win her nomination for the 2015 election, and she was just written off as a political non-entity. Right after that, she said she was leaving politics for good. Of course, like all conservative failures, she got media gigs and a radio show on Global, in a Herald column in the Calgary Herald. And anyways, the NDP, so there's this split between the PCs and the Wild Rose, and that allows in the 2015 election Rachel Notley in the NDP to come to power. And they come to power, and they they do a few things. Like the Alberta NDP, when they were in government, I mean, when it came to like oil and gas industry, I mean, they were horrific. I mean, just shilling for the industry, running, positioning themselves to the right of Trudeau. But they did do some good things, like on the edges. They increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour from like, Alberta had the lowest minimum wage in the country, and the Alberta NDP made it the highest at the time, and they expended a lot of political capital to do so. They introduced a suite of like labor reforms that sort of brought Alberta up to speed. But then a year into their tenure, after the federal Conservatives lose the federal election, Jason Kenney comes back to Alberta, and he's like, I'm going to unite the right. I'm going to, I guess, sort of finish what Danielle Smith started, not through this sort of backdoor, like floor crossing, but I'm going to get elected leader of the PCs on an explicit vow to merge it with the Wild Rose Party. And he did that.
Bring together these two wings of the conservative movement in Alberta.
Which is what, I mean, he played an instrumental role in doing the same federally with the PCs and the Reform Party and the Canadian Alliance they kept changing their name, but and I mean, it worked, and in Alberta's case, to make a long story short, it also did. He came in, ran a very like angry, embittered campaign, sort of cultivated these forces in Alberta that were quasi-separatist, right? They thought that Ottawa was sort of holding Alberta back from exceeding its true potential and becoming this like low tax, privatize everything jurisdiction. And I
just to briefly interrupt you too, I just want to point out like that I think this is the first kind of like lesson here, which is we're going to see it still doesn't seem to have like been internalized anywhere in the progressive movement in Alberta, because like you're pointing out, it's not like the NDP when they did manage to take control of Alberta were just completely terrible. They had a few good policies, like you talked about the minimum wage. I think they did some stuff with like childcare, making that more affordable, and some social programs that they installed and to help people that were genuinely I think, progressive. But like you point out, their insistence on trying to like win over these like oil companies and these reactionary kind of like workers movements by suggesting like they're going to be the moral, responsible pipeline party, and kind of trying to thread this needle of being the progressive, more liberal Albertan party that can do both of these things, that can have a progressive vision while also doing whatever the oil companies want, basically. And just you see how their effort to thread that needle, despite climate activists saying like, while you're in power, you have to start this kind of transition. You have to start to try and like, speak to these alienated workers that have been screwed over by these oil companies. And rather than like, throwing yourself at the mercy of these companies, you try to like actually initiate some kind of just transition, right? That's what the activists were saying. And they were told repeatedly, no, we know what we're doing. We know how to win elections. This is Alberta. This is how you do it. You have to play it like this. And then it didn't stop Jason Kenney from coming in and framing them as being these like communist oil and gas hating, hippy dippy pipeline sabotagers. Like that's basically how Kenney framed them. And that's how these reactionary constituencies in Alberta, they never stopped seeing them like that, regardless of what their actual policies were. Right?
Yeah, and I think an important piece to note for that is the climate leadership plan the NDP brought in 2016, because just the way it was announced and rolled out was very symbolic of the NDP's approach. They, Rachel Notley and her environment minister at the time, Shannon Phillips, got up on stage with the CEOs of all the major oil and gas companies and, some indigenous leaders and environmentalists, and said, we're all working together. We're going to cap emissions from the oil sands, or tar sands if you prefer, which you're not supposed to say in Alberta. But that cap allowed the tar sands to still grow. They introduced a carbon tax, which again, they expended a lot of political capital on. Not the best way to reduce emissions, but I mean, it was something. And, I talked to Tzipora Berman, who's an environmentalist in BC, who the NDP brought in to work on their like oil sands advisory council, which recommended the emissions cap and the carbon tax. And now she's like, I wasted my time. I mean, we're in a climate emergency, and the commitments that these oil and gas companies made to me aren't worth the paper they're written on. And so it was really this very typical triangulation of being like, okay, the oil and gas industry is here, environmentalists are here, so let's rise above, right?
Yeah.
And but then Kenney came in, and he attacked Tzipora Berman with particular viciousness. And I mean, she ended up getting assaulted at the Edmonton airport by some chud who was riled up by Kenney and the rebel and this entire like hard right ecosystem that Kenney was very good for a time at dog whistling to. So Kenney comes to power in 2019. First things he does are things that like the entire conservative sort of coalition can agree on, right? So cutting corporate taxes. The NDP increased corporate taxes from 10% to 12% when they were in power. Kenney rolled them back to 8%. He passed a bunch of anti-labor legislation. He created this 2-tiered minimum wage because the NDP had raised it to 15 for everyone. He was like, okay, now it's going to be $13 an hour for youth, as if they aren't doing the same jobs as adults. And when he was asked about it, he said a quote that really stands out in my mind, that $13 an hour is a heck of a lot better than $0 an hour, which, I mean, true.
Impossible to argue with that.
Yeah, so he just pursued this sort of broad-based neoliberal agenda that appealed to sort of the rural sort of like Alberta firsters. and the sort of more urban, like moderate conservatives who don't actually exist, as the election results showed us. But then the pandemic comes. And I mean, that's when things really, that's really when Kenny starts to have a lot of trouble keeping this coalition together. Because on the one hand, you have the sort of more urban PC types who want like basic pandemic restrictions, but to still keep business as usual going as much as possible. And then you have the old Wild Rose types who are just like, let it rip. Like, who cares? Like, we need to do what Ron DeSantis did.
Yeah.
And those people, and so Kenny from day one took the approach of, we need to keep business running as usual, but we also need some restrictions. And throughout the pandemic, he was trying to balance these two factions. And so he would have to be dragged kicking and screaming to actually introduce some restrictions. And when he did, they didn't make any sense. Like, you couldn't gather outside with other people. And this was in like December 2020, which was the deadliest COVID wave in Alberta. You couldn't gather outside with other people, but you could go to a mall, which had capacity restrictions, but who's enforcing the capacity restrictions? So none of this made sense. It fueled the anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine movement. To make a long story short, those were the very people who mobilized against Kenny. It was people who thought he had done too much to mitigate the pandemic. This organization called Take Back Alberta forms, started by a former Kenny staffer named David Parker, who said sort of the breaking point was when the government started arresting pastors of congregations that refused to abide by like capacity restrictions. And basically Smith comes out of the political wilderness. I mean, she has her radio show at this time. And I mean, she interviewed Kenny on it a few times throughout the pandemic, which is pretty funny to go back and listen to those interviews. Because she was a very talented broadcaster, very good at just making these sort of erratic conspiratorial claims, but saying it as a matter of common sense, and then having someone on who doesn't agree. And, she says, well, I respect your opinion. That's interesting. You make some good points, but here's what I have to say. And she's very good at that. But basically in January 2021, Smith announces she does the Barry Weiss, Glenn Greenwald like self-cancellation thing, where she announces that people are just too politically correct these days, and it's really constraining her ability to speak her mind on the radio, and that's why she's quitting. She sets up an account on locals.com, which I believe is this like private social media site where it's like Substack, but it's social media, so people can pay to subscribe to you and get like exclusive like AMAs and stuff and subscriber only posts. And she starts this newsletter where she's making a lot of wild claims about the pandemic in like cryptocurrency, and she's like linking to like anti-Semitic blogs.
So what you're saying basically is that she's like a totally down the center mainstream conservative, basically, because now they all believe in this shit.
She's someone we need to find common ground with, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyways, this leadership review against Kenny is mobilized, and from within the party, and he hangs on by a thread. He gets 51.4% support, I think, but that's clearly not enough to continue as a leader. I mean, you're not going to be able to do anything,
especially when he's spent the last year being attacked by the very like wackos that he's been specifically cultivating to be part of the movement, right? It's been like this. Those are the people that were most fervently against him. So I imagine Kenny was like, you know what? I think I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with this shit anymore.
Right. Well, he even said leaked audio came out while he was fighting this leadership review. That was like, look, I don't even want to do that. Like, the easiest thing for me would just to quit and go to the private sector. But
Yeah, it's
this
gonna be a
party's
lobbyist or whatever.
yeah, which is what he's doing now.
Course.
He got a plum gig with the C.D. Howe Institute. He's an advisor to Bennett Jones, a law firm in Calgary, even though he's not a lawyer.
Nice.
Oh yes, he's on the board of ATCO, a sort of power company. So he's doing great. He's living his best life.
Yeah.
But in this leaked audio, he said that like the people who are mobilizing against me are lunatics. They have some unacceptable views. It was very similar to what Trudeau was saying about the convoy people, and that was when like his goose was cooked in retrospect, right? Like he had nothing but disdain for his own base, and that was what did him in. Whereas Smith was saying, I understand your frustrations. We're never going to have lockdowns again, even though Alberta only really had a lockdown during like the first month of the pandemic. But even then, as elsewhere, it didn't apply to workplaces, as we saw with the meatpacking plants here, which, Cargill and High River, which is actually where Danielle Smith lives, even though she represents a riding 3 hours away in Medicine Hat. That was the Cargill plant was the biggest outbreak in North America at one point. And so Smith says, I'm going to be your authentic champion. Kenny was just another Ottawa elite who was pretending to support your cause for electoral gain, but I actually believe it.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
Yeah. And so she's propelled to power. And she's been premier for not even a year, and her signature piece of legislation was the Alberta Sovereignty Act, which essentially allows the Alberta government to take a federal piece of legislation and just say, nope, not going to do it. You don't have the authority. This is provincial jurisdiction. And she made a lot of comments too, like during her leadership campaign on like far right media, saying that like the cops who like handed out fines and arrested people for like flagrantly violating COVID restrictions were actually breaking the law, and maybe should do something about that, which is very like Freeman on the land type energy.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't have the authority, because the Magna Carta, or
Sure.
But anyways, the NDP decided in its campaign against her, which again, it very, very much shades of 2016 with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, right?
Take the high ground.
But claiming the higher ground, but at the same time running a completely negative campaign that just dug up all the bizarre positions Smith took over the past couple years and broadcasting them to voters.
Okay, yeah.
And Smith, her campaign wisely didn't campaign on any of that. They were like, look, we're running on hiring more doctors, cutting taxes, and in passing legislation that requires a referendum to increase taxes again. Implementing the $10 a day childcare agreement that they reached with the federal government, which is a really bad agreement if you look at the details of it. Like, it essentially, first of all, it applies to it gives money to like for-profit childcare centers, and even then the $10 a day funding is just for what these childcare operators define as core services.
Okay.
And they're given the latitude to define whatever that is, and then everything else is fees for parents. And the NDP's response to that was just to talk about all these views Smith holds, which I've no doubt she actually holds them and actually wants to bring about things like an Alberta police force and a Alberta pension plan and all these things to sort of whittle away at like federal government's like jurisdiction over Alberta. And I mean, she's mused before about making people pay for doctor visits and privatizing hospitals and creating charter hospitals like modeled after charter schools, which Alberta is the only province to have them, which are privately operated schools that are fully publicly funded, and they're allowed to charge whatever fees they want. They don't have like public accountability like the public school boards do. But then you look at what the NDP was running on, its actual policies, and they weren't all that different from what Smith was advocating on the campaign trail. I mean, in the most recent budget, because I mean, there's a lot of money because oil prices were so high, and Alberta is so dependent on royalties, that it was a free spending budget that sort of, I think, went against Smith's most libertarian instincts. I mean, her career started as an intern at the Fraser Institute, and the Fraser Institute sort of denounced the budget as fiscally irresponsible because she didn't use the surplus to just cut people's taxes. She actually like made investments, and those investments were targeted towards the types of things conservatives like charter schools, for example.
Yeah.
But one of the things she did was to cap tuition increases for post-secondary institutions at 2% starting like 2 years from now. And I mean, since Kenney, I mean, post-secondary institutions have just had their budgets slashed wildly, and those cuts have come mostly at the expense of arts and humanities programs that teach you to think critically and not just be an obedient worker, but to be a citizen, right? And to think critically about the way things are. The NDP's response to that was say, we're going to cap tuition at this year's rates and allow it to increase at the rate of inflation. Now, last time the NDP were in power, they had continued a tuition freeze that went back to the old PC government that defeated Smith in her past political life. And so their alternative was, we're going to cap tuition higher than it was the last time we were in power. Right?
Yeah.
They said that they didn't say, the only thing they said about reversing the massive cuts to post-secondaries was that we're going to offer stable and predictable funding, which, I mean, tells you it's going to be low funding, but it will be stable and predictable, right? On taxes, right? I mentioned what Smith's policy was of cutting income taxes and then forcing a referendum if any future government wants to increase taxes. The NDP's platform was to freeze income taxes, to eliminate the small business tax, but to increase corporate taxes 3 percentage points from 3 percentage points from 8 to 11, so they would still be lower than they were when Kenney took power, and they would still be the lowest in the country. And they put out a graphic of a graph showing their proposed tax rate at 11% compared to Doug Ford's tax rate at 11.5%, saying that we're going to have lower corporate taxes than Doug Ford's Ontario, as if there's some sort of selling point. And already, you see, centrist pundits say, that was the reason the NDP lost, because they were saying that we should increase corporate taxes at all. right? Not the tone of the campaign, not being bereft of ideas, not talking about climate change while the province is having unprecedented
the whole province is on
wildfires.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's that actually they wanted to increase corporate taxes at all. And and that's what really concerns me about the lessons that the NDP are going to learn from this. It's not going to be that the sort of moderate conservatives that we were trying to appeal to expand our support don't really exist. They're quite fine with Smith's agenda, as long as, I mean, they may not like all the pandemic pseudoscience and the Alberta sovereignty stuff, but if she's going to cut their taxes and make it harder for a future government to increase them, they'll accept the other stuff. But that's not going to be the lesson. That doesn't appear to be the lesson the NDP is learning. It's that they were too progressive. They were too bold. They were too mean to Danielle Smith. That they need to acquiesce to more of her agenda. And I mean, this goes back to in January. I know I've been rambling for a while.
No, this is great. This context is fantastic, and I think any American can recognize this exact trend. You're seeing the same thing with the Labour Party in the UK. We're seeing this exact situation play out throughout liberal democracies, like throughout the West. So I think it's important to have this context about Alberta for everybody. Yeah,
and I mean, the NDP is acting like they want. I mean, Notley's has no intention of stepping down as leader,
which is amazing to me.
Yeah, and it's like I think that there is an argument to be made that you can win a moral victory in an election by shifting the political discourse in your direction without actually winning, like Bernie Sanders, like Jeremy Corbyn in 2017. But
it seems like the opposite has happened here.
Yeah. They helped Smith move the political discourse rightwards, and they're calling it a win. Because I mean, the UCP did lose seats. They lost a lot of their cabinet. They lost a handful of cabinet ministers in Calgary who are seen as more moderate voices. But the NDP strategy wasn't to shift the political discourse, or it was to win at all costs. And they didn't do that. I'm sure there are consultants who are going to make a lot of money off the NDP continually losing. I lost train of thought from where I was at before.
We'll get back there. But I mean, you talk about how they haven't learned this lesson in the days following the election. It's just amazing because you point out with the whole Jason Kenney situation, they never learned the basic lesson from that. And like we were saying, I think there's a lot of parallels with the Democratic Party in America. This idea that we just live, it's just basically fundamentally accepting this framing that we live in a really conservative, reactionary, in this case, province. But you can extrapolate the whole thing to the country of Canada or America or whatever. We just live in this really deeply reactionary province. So we can't talk about climate change. We can't talk about defunding the police. We can't be too progressive, because then there's just no chance of winning. And I'm open to entertaining that idea to an extent. I know it's there to an extent. That's the reality in Alberta. It is a really reactionary and conservative province in terms of people's views. But I guess the issue with that is, as always, is if you compromise on all these progressive values in order to win elections, and you refuse to actually go after any of these kind of progressive priorities because it's too alienating to people, even in that case, when you've won, all that's really done is you've continued this brand of politics, this kind of conservative brand of politics that if you're a progressive, you're supposed to be against, that you're supposed to be pushing back against, rather than entrenching it even further. And again, I'm willing to entertain the idea that it's we have to do certain things a certain way because of this rural province and this reactionary province and all the oil company power that they have. But when it seems like no one's willing to ever try, let's run an actually progressive campaign. Let's try to even speak to these rural communities of workers and speak to their actual material needs and talk about the ways that they're actually getting fucked by the oil companies and like actually try and have a progressive vision for everybody. I understand that that's alienating for people, and that's in some parts of the province it's not going to be popular, but it would be interesting once to see one of these major parties actually try to run a campaign like that without compromising on all their values and actually trying to run on and win with a actual genuinely progressive agenda that speaks to all these huge crises that are going on. Like you talked about the climate crisis. If you abandon talking about climate because it's too upsetting to these like conservative constituencies, or you abandon this idea of a just transition, moving away from the power of these oil companies to win, okay, great, but you're still in the middle of a climate crisis, and you're just entrenching all these very systems that we need to be trying to shift and trying to shift into something better and greener. It's like they don't seem to ever be capable of learning this lesson. And again, it's whether it's Alberta or the US or the UK or wherever, it doesn't seem like any of these so-called progressive parties are willing to take this chance to try and run a campaign like this. And even despite the lessons of Notley's previous government, they still are so reticent to try and do this. And it's amazing to see so-called progressive parties around the world neoliberal progressive parties around the world keep banging their heads against this and wondering why they can't seem to ever enact an agenda.
Yeah, they didn't even talk about their record when they were last in government, which, as you know, I said earlier, wasn't the greatest, but there were accomplishments they made that did make people's lives better.
And it's not like it was someone else; it was actually Notley. It's the same person.
Yeah, and they reduced child poverty in half.
Yeah,
they didn't talk about that once. On election night, David Shepherd, who's one of their MLAs in Edmonton, and one of the safest NDP ridings in the province, downtown Edmonton. And he was asked by a CBC reporter about the NDP's last record in government. The only thing he said was, well, we were the first government in years to build a new pipeline. And it's like, the province is on fire, and that's your signature accomplishment. That's the only thing about your record you want to talk about. You think people are going to be turned off by the fact that you reduce child poverty? Like, it boggles the mind. It really does. But back to what you mentioned about the just transition, I think this was where the NDP was running to the right of the Trudeau Liberals. In January, the Liberals announced their sort of draft plan for this just transition, which has a lot of problems that, you could talk to any, climate organizer about. But Smith came out and said this is going to take away people in Alberta's jobs, when literally the purpose of the legislation is to do the opposite. And why won't the NDP denounce this? And she kept hammering about the Trudeau Singh Notley alliance, right? And that Jagmeet Singh is like Rachel Notley's boss that she answers to.
Yeah.
And rather than defend this completely like anodyne piece of legislation, Notley says it needs to be scrapped completely. This is bad for Alberta. It's bad for Alberta workers. And she was asked by Michelle Bellefontaine, a CBC reporter here in Edmonton, well, was this like, aren't you concerned that taking this position is going to alienate your base who want to see more economic diversification? They want to see people transitioned into jobs in the clean economy. And Notley's response, was astounding. It was just like, yeah, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Tough to say. Like, she didn't care. And then the thing always is, progressives on the one hand are told they're irrelevant, you're a burden on us, your views aren't going to get us elected. And then when they lose, it's because progressives didn't like line up with enough enthusiasm behind their mediocre platform.
Yeah.
And so,
this exact same story, just it's been decades of this exact phenomenon over and over and over again throughout the Western world. It's truly amazing.
Yes, and it's like either progressives are irrelevant, and it doesn't matter whether they stay home and don't vote for you or vote green, which is what I did first time in my life, because the Alberta Green Party platform was actually quite solid. It was a social democratic platform,
Yeah.
essentially. Or that they're actually crucial to your coalition and they need to vote for you. And if they need to vote for you, if that's true, if they're not actually irrelevant, then give them a reason to.
Yeah.
And again, as you correctly note, this is a debate happening in democratic, small d democratic politics everywhere, but also capital D democratic politics in the United States.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's like we do all our outreach to the right, and anyone to the left of like fucking Justin Trudeau is just supposed to line up and vote for it because the other guys are worse. That's basically the same thing. And you see the vitriol, and again, this is also not exclusive to Alberta. You see the vitriol they have, like you're pointing out, for like the actual activists and the people in their party that are where they absorb the energy of these social movements and expect to like benefit from it. And you see, like, for example, another example with the Alberta NDP was when the LEAP Manifesto was published, like Naomi Klein's organization, the LEAP Manifesto, which again, you talk about a just transition, which was like I guess you could call it radical in the scope of like Canadian politics, but it's not some like outrageous, like fucking Stalinist kind of demand, the LEAP Manifesto. It's just this idea of, it's basically a Green New Deal. It's essentially, version of that. And you saw Alberta NDP reach out, like they were pissed off, like when the LEAP published this, like, and they called them out and they bent over backwards to distance themselves from it because it was so damaging to their credibility, they felt, and then the Alberta,
Rachel Notley and Shannon Phillips, they had a meltdown over it at the convention. They acted like it was like it was the Communist Manifesto or something. They're like, and to this day, people still blame Naomi and Avi for costing the Alberta NDP the 2019 election, because this not even incrementalist, this completely unprincipled centrism never fails. We fail it, right? Yeah. And again, what the LEAP Manifesto was advocating in 2016 is like common sense now.
Yeah.
Like, of course, we need to transition to a renewable economy. Of course, this provides an opportunity to provide green public jobs like childcare, like, postal workers doing banking and all these things. This is like mainstream progressive thought outside of the corridors of power. And then corridors of power, it's like, no, we actually need to keep everything the same, but give oil and gas companies money to invest in renewable energy and like carbon capture technology, which is totally
just
unproven. That allows oil companies to extract money from governments and them to keep drilling while claiming it to be committed to net zero.
Yeah. And like exactly what we're talking about, this is exactly why, because there's still this kind of like plan underway in this certain segment of like the progressive movement in Canada to like take over the NDP with this kind of like entryist tactic. And Avi Lewis is at the center of that. Like he's kind of trying to run for something and be a part of the NDP. And I think with the idea to eventually take over the party and push it in that direction. But this is exactly why I'm skeptical of like all the energy and resources and organizing that's going into this idea when we see time and time again, like what the NDP's reaction is to like these kinds of like even mild progressivism or the kind of like the mild environmentalism, which like you say is total common sense now. I feel like it's just the Alberta NDP is always the example that I go to, and the BC NDP, we see the way that they've come together to block all kind of progressive progress. At the same time, and people still are promoting this idea that the NDP is this vehicle for entryism that can be taken over and pulled in this direction. But it's just, it's been years of this now, and it's still so far away from ever being coming to fruition. And this is exactly why I'm totally skeptical about this whole strategy and putting all that energy and resources into this idea of using the NDP take it over to pull it in this direction. It just like, it seems like a just totally futile waste of time. And Alberta's the ultimate example of that.
Well, I think it's a testament to how fucked we are, that is our only avenue, and it's repeatedly failed. But what else is there within the structure of democratic politics? I mean, there's nothing else. And I obviously we saw how the BC NDP rat fucked Anjali Epidurai by changing the rules in the middle of the campaign, which she violated before they changed them. But I do think it was important that she made this stand, in that she showed the party establishment that yes, like, progressives are here in the NDP and they want you to do better. Right. I think that's a good example of a moral victory in politics. Right. She wasn't in it to win. It just happened that she gained a lot of support when she put her name out there, because people do want to see, especially people who are involved with progressive politics, do want to see bold change. The question is, does the broader electorate? And my answer to that is, well, it depends how you sell it to them. Clearly there's an openness among the broader electorate for radical change from the right. So, and there's this energy there, and we can write off, the majority of Albertans as just a bunch of yahoos who don't know what's good for them, or we can try and win them over. And, it's really depressing not to see any of these things that I think are so obvious. They're staring us directly in the eyes. But, again, I think, Martin Lukash had a great piece, I think, a couple of years ago about how the NDP is beholden to this consultant class that, win or lose, they get paid. And it's frustrating. But I do hope to see in Alberta a similar challenge from the left in the NDP to take down Rachel Notley. Again, there's it's a major uphill battle, but even to just show, to make the show, we're here, and we you need to take us seriously and stop taking us for granted. And I do hope to see it, and I've heard some rumblings from people I know and trust about that, so that'll be interesting to see.
I guess the thing that I'm always kind of skeptical about is whether this idea of going against this kind of powerful NDP establishment through the party is the way to go, or whether it's a new party or challenging them in some other way. I definitely agree with the idea of engaging in that system and trying to run on that kind of a platform. But I think maybe eventually the NDP is going to have to be taken on directly because of, like you said, the entrenched power of this kind of consultant class, and how they're so allergic to anyone that's kind of outside of that system trying to pull them in that direction. And I talked about the way that they immediately blame activists and punch left in these situations, like you talked about, but we hinted at it before, but you were part of that online. So I just wanted to know if you could just talk about who you were mixing it up with after you had some mild comment, after you've, as a journalist, have covered the failings of the NDP throughout the campaign. When the campaign didn't work out, you pointed out all these problems, and then you have part of people that are part of this whole elite power structure of the NDP and the consultant class blaming you, Jeremy Appel, for sabotaging them. Do you want to just talk about what happened with that?
Yeah, well, I was surprised my existence was even acknowledged, but the individual in question is Brian Mason, who was the NDP leader before Rachel Notley. So he sort of, I don't think he gets enough credit for presiding over this sort of drift to a more centrist, unprincipled, brokerage style of politics. In, I believe it was 2008 when he was the leader, the party lost half of its caucus. So they had 4 people and they were reduced to 2. And the
election understander has logged on.
And so the response to that was, oh, we're too critical of the oil and gas industry. we need to present ourselves as being their champions rather than their critics. And I mean, you know, in 2015, Notley was like mildly critical of the oil and gas industry. She talked about increasing the royalties they pay and how they're calling for us to build more pipelines, but they're shipping jobs to Texas. And then the NDP government launched this royalty review to look into the possibility of oil and gas companies paying more. And the review came back and they said, well, oil and gas prices are really low now, so no, we shouldn't increase royalties. They didn't talk about the possibility of increasing them in the future. Like, it would have come in handy now that oil and gas prices are so high. That wasn't on the table. And then from then on, the NDP just did not challenge the oil and gas industry in the slightest. I mean, right, their entire climate strategy was begging the oil and gas industry to get on board, which they did, right? Their CEOs went up there and talked about how proud they were of the NDP's climate plan. But then almost all those CEOs were turfed by their boards of directors after, and they all lined up behind Kenny. But anyways, so Mason was the transportation minister in Notley's government. He's sort of this, you know, hard scrabble, like working class guy who doesn't pull punches. He has that reputation of, though he seems to pull punches when it's not people to the left of him. But yeah, I mean, you know, I was drunk, you know, the night of the election. You know, I drank a lot because it took forever for those results to come in.
And it's very depressing.
And it was very depressing because you saw that the UCP were going to win. It was just a matter of how those numbers added up. And I just fired off a string of tweets about you know, I can't believe the party that hired an Airbnb lobbyist to run their campaign, Nate Rotman, during a housing affordability crisis, lost. Can't believe a party that didn't talk about climate change while the province was on fire lost, and all these things. And so he quote tweeted that, was like, oh, I can't believe this journalist, or sorry, he said would-be journalist, which I think is important, that's been shitting on the NDP during
Jeremy, you are a journalist.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess I'm not a Brian Mason certified journalist, which, you know, it's a cross I'll have to bear.
Yeah.
You know, who's been shitting on the NDP during a tightly fought campaign is now shitting on them for losing. And it's like, yeah, I warned them that if they continued this strategy, they were going to lose, and they lost. And so, yeah, I'm going to shit on them for not listening to people who were warning them. And anyways, we spent the whole, I wasted a lot of time yesterday getting into it on Twitter, but I did ratio him from, you know, all corners. So, I mean, that was kind of fun. Yeah, I mean, it
just speaks to the attitude anymore. They have towards people that criticize them in this way. You know, it's just such an example of that attitude.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't live in Alberta anymore. He fucked off to wine country after not running for re-election in 2015 in BC. And, you know, I wrote a piece for The Breach about this sort of milquetoast NDP campaign, and I spoke to him for it. And obviously, he gave me the party line that, no, the strategy is great. We need to win over conservative voters. And that just because we're strategically campaigning on certain things doesn't mean that we're not going to do the things you want when we're in power. And, you know, I thought it was valuable in doing reporting to have that perspective in the story, to be like, well, look, and I found it remarkably candid, too, that he was like, yeah, well, we still want to do the things you want us to do. We just can't talk about them.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, no, apparently I shoulder some of the blame for the loss. Obviously, you know, I quote tweeted him flippantly saying, oh, yeah, it's all my fault. And he was like, you know, I'm not saying that. And it's like, yeah, well, Twitter's not real life. Like,
yeah. No, but it's like
Would you want
they
it?
do have this. It's not just about you though, but it's about they do the people that are in the power structures of these parties in the actual parties in the consultant class. They do have this attitude about activists and about or not even activists, but people that try to challenge them on these progressive values that they claim to hold. Like this, that's what I mean. It's like it's not just about you, but this is how they feel about anyone that ever criticizes them from the left for not going after, not campaigning on these things enough, not doing enough when they're in power, engaging in this kind of like centrist triangulation, which just fails time and time again. This is how they have. This is the attitude they have. They don't. There's never any self-reflection after any of these elections with any of these neoliberal progressive parties. There's never any self-reflection. Maybe we do need to be more progressive. Maybe we should listen to the activists in our party a bit more. The people that are out there willing to do the work and are the most excited and energized. These big social movements. Maybe we should. There's never any of this sort of reflection. It's always, why are you criticizing us? Why are you being mean to this? It's almost like you like the other guys and you want us to lose. It's the same fucking thing every time. And this is kind of why I'm trying to draw this parallel, because we just keep seeing this exact story play out over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's immensely frustrating, and the contrast too is so stark between the NDP trotting out every endorsement from a former PC minister that they got, who said they were loaning their vote to the NDP because they thought Danielle Smith was so dangerous, which I mean you see with the Democrats in the States too, right? Like all these like David Frum is now this like liberal hero. They're so welcoming to people to the right of them, and these are the people they defeated in 2015. They ran against them and won, and there was a split in the conservative vote which allowed the NDP to win. But like now you're saying these guys are great and they're our friends and we're going to be beholden to them. It is bleak, and it's frustrating, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm like, because there's no alternative electorally.
Do you know what I think? Do you want to can I pitch you on what I think the answer should be?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we need Albertan Chavez. I think that's what we need, because that's what Alberta needs, because like I think one thing that sometimes it's hard to admit in the progressive movement, which is that we do need to have this transition into a more sustainable energy future. That's obviously, but I think we all need to realistically understand that that's not just going to happen overnight. And while that transition is taking place, there still needs to be an oil and gas industry. We need to work on transitioning, but that's not you don't just stop it overnight and immediately just transition and continue to meet everyone's energy needs. Cause like we still need to keep the lights on for people in our province, in our country. And it's also, I think sometimes it's a little chauvinistic to criticize, nations around the world that have resources like oil and gas that need to like move that to market to like fund social programs and fund infrastructure and things like that. So under this basic idea that, the oil and gas industry needs to still exist, but it shouldn't be run by these foreign oil companies. These companies should all get nationalized. So as long as this industry exists, it's a source of like good jobs for people still, where they're not beholden to these massive foreign corporations and all the profits or most of the profits, except for this little stipend or whatever they've agreed to give away. All the other profits are going to the CEOs and the shareholders and the investments of these foreign oil companies. I think someone's going to have to come along. And again, this is so far outside of whatever the NDP ever talks about that I can't imagine it's ever going to happen under that platform. But I do kind of think that someone's going to need to come along to square that circle and say, okay, if we're going to have an oil and gas industry, sure, we do still need to have that. But this is the kind of economic conditions under which this industry is going to work. It's going to work in a way that benefits the people that actually live here while we transition to a better future where we're not destroying the planet and we're averting these horrific climate impacts that we're already seeing. I feel like someone can come along to square that circle and, or at least try to, that's what I think Alberta needs. And that's what I think probably, would be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I mean they're vampires. The oil and gas
Yeah.
industry. I mean, and they've just robbed the province blind. I mean, for so many years. I mean, we haven't even talked about all the billions of dollars of like abandoned wells and pipelines across the province that perfectly solvent companies, um, just who are making record profits, just aren't going to invest in cleaning up because they're not being forced to.
Yeah, all the
And
tailings and like the massive, like disastrous, like lakes of chemicals and shit that are just sitting there. Yeah.
yeah, and they need to be forced to do it now while they're still making profit, because then when the price of oil inevitably collapses, they're just going to be like, oh, sorry, you don't have money. Guess you have to subsidize it. In Smith's proposal, which she advocated for when she was a corporate lobbyist 2 years ago, and it was even seen as even too extreme by the Kenney government, was to give oil and gas companies a discount on future royalties if they clean up their mess. Um, and the NDP ran against that, as well they should have, but they didn't offer an alternative for how are we going to force these companies to pay. They didn't outline a plan, just saying, oh yeah, we need to rework the laws. Well, yeah, in what way? Like, give us a vision. And but yeah, and I mean, all these subsidies that are being given to the oil and gas industry, they're just going straight to shareholders, and they're going into investments for automation. They're actually eliminating jobs. But there's still this mythology persists in Alberta that oil and gas means jobs, when that's increasingly not the case. And someone needs to stand up to that and take control, as you alluded to, over these companies. Yes, we're going to need oil and gas in the short term still while we transition to renewables, but it needs to be on our terms, not a bunch of foreign-owned companies that have no regard for the people who live here, let alone the environment and indigenous sovereignty and all these things that our progressive leaders purport to value. Now, speaking of solutions, though, I did want to bring back up Take Back Alberta, because I do think there's a lot the left can learn from them, right? I mean, this is a grassroots group. I mean, grassroots from the right. Obviously, it's somewhat astroturfed, but I mean, they've been organizing on the ground of people who are like disenchanted and alienated, and a lot of them, with deeply held social conservative views that they believe are being, persecuted, but they're turning them into an electoral force. And I think they did play a significant role in some of the ridings that NDP needed to win that they didn't win, in mobilizing people to vote conservative. And I mean, they've been seizing power in the UCP. It isn't just that their preferred choice of leader got elected and they're going to convince people to vote for her. They have a long-term strategy. I mean, they've essentially taken over the board of directors of the UCP. They bust people into their AGM that happened a couple weeks after Smith won the leadership race. And there were 9 seats on the board out of 18 that were open. The Take Back Alberta endorsed candidates won every single one. The premier is one of the 18 seats on the board. So now they have a majority with 9 plus the premier, who agrees with them on everything. And that's explicitly, they're quite open about their strategy, to their credit. Yeah. I mean, they'll talk about it in the media to, the Calgary Sun and the Globe and Mail, that the goal is to hold Smith to account, to seize the levers of the party to ensure she doesn't stray from their agenda. And David Parker said, if they do, we'll vote for a smaller, separatist party. We don't we're firm in our convictions, and it isn't about winning a single election. It's about building power in the long term. And they're also taking over local constituency associations and getting their candidates nominated. I mean, in Jason Kenney's old riding, the guy who won it Eric Bouchard is like a total like Take Back Alberta guy, like thinks Kenney did too much to mitigate the pandemic. Is into all sorts of like COVID conspiracies. And he wants this. They talk about the unspecified major reforms that need to be made to the healthcare system, and they won't say what they were. But Smith does have a track record of advocating for private healthcare, and she wants to begin the process by giving every Albertan $300 in an account, and then they can select alternative health services from an Uber-like app.
Jesus.
So, yeah, and I mean, she said that she wants to Uberify the public sector, right? Cool. I mean, this is who we're up against, right? But in order to challenge that, you can't just say, "Wow, isn't this wild? Isn't this person dangerous?" You have to provide a coherent alternative and explain why that's better. And there was none of that from the NDP in this election, and they're just going to, it appears, continue making the same mistakes, and hope that maybe next time they can inch out a win. They can convince more former conservatives that Smith is a menace. But also, we don't know how long Smith's going to be around, because I mean, again, she lost seats. Like, it wasn't a great performance from her.
Yeah.
I mean, she
was close.
Yeah, I mean, it was closer than 2019 was. I mean, it still wasn't close, but it's not great. I mean, they lost a bunch of cabinet ministers. They lost a bunch of seats in Calgary. And I'm sure the knives are sharpening from, I mean, a UCP source of mine told me he was like on the Kenney side of things. He said, our hope is that we win, but it's a diminished majority, and then we get rid of Smith when the time is right. And but I mean, again, the fact that Take Back Alberta has such a stranglehold over the party that only appears to be growing suggests that it may not be as easy for the party establishment to get rid of her. So that is definitely a development I think people outside of Alberta should watch. But I think the lesson from Take Back Alberta is people on the hard left need to start doing that. If they're going to take that route of like getting involved in electoral politics and trying to change the NDP from within, it's not enough to just try and get a slightly more progressive candidate elected. You need to seize the levers of power and ensure that the party is beholden to your agenda. Now, this is always harder for the left to do than the right, because the right have all this, money behind.
Yeah, like you said, it's not fully grassroots or anything like that. It is an AstroTurf movement, and that money just doesn't really exist on the left to the same extent.
Yeah, like, I mean, one of Take Back Alberta's like regional organizers there is Vince Byfield, whose dad, Ted Byfield, was the founder of the Alberta Report magazine, this very influential neocon rag that came out of Alberta in the 90s and was sort of the voice for the reform movement, and wrote some horrible things about gay people and about how apartheid in South Africa was good. And it was very much Canada's like answer to the National Review. So, I mean, the sort of anti-establishment disposition of Take Back Alberta is somewhat faked. I mean, David Parker worked for Jason Kenney. He worked for Stephen Harper before that. So yeah, I mean, there's a facade, but I think it would be interesting if people on the left in Alberta tried to combat that with something that's actually grassroots, that something that actually that takes all these legitimate frustrations of people over the course of the pandemic, where we just saw nothing really changed except everything's a bit shittier. Wealth is still transferring upwards.
Yeah.
and to articulate a cause for those grievances that isn't just like, oh, woke people want to destroy our religious values or something.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of it as well, is that there doesn't seem to be on the right as much a resistance to these like insurgent movements, because ultimately these extreme reactionary movements aren't really a threat to power in any way. They're not really a threat to capital. Whereas any movement like that from the left is supposed to be a threat to capital. And that's why generally in the media and in politics, you have this willingness to listen to and absorb these like people with extreme right-wing views, because ultimately economically they're not interested in challenging our economic system in any way. But the moment someone is mildly progressive, that's when the knives have to come out, and we have to ensure that they're not able to articulate this vision, because they might represent an actual meaningful threat to the powerful people that run the province or the country or the state or the city or the whatever.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, Rachel Notley's a landlord, right? So if you look at the NDP housing platform, which is just give landlords more money, and
being run by an Airbnb person.
And yeah, they got an Airbnb lobbyist who wouldn't even confirm that he was working for the NDP campaign. The NDP, made a big fuss about, because Smith had this policy that she was only going to take one question from each reporter, so more reporters could ask more questions. And of course, what she was talking about was people from far right media, right, like Rebel and True North, all that. And Notley's response was, "We'll answer as many questions as legitimate journalists have for us, but we're not going to answer questions from Western Standard and Rebel and whatnot." But myself and other progressive journalists, during the campaign, they wouldn't respond to any of our inquiries. We just didn't exist to them. And you saw this with Ricochet's great piece on Nathan Rotman, how he wouldn't confirm and they wouldn't confirm that he was running their campaign. And then, like, after polls closed, or a few hours maybe before polls closed, Rotman tweeted, "Oh man, great to work on this campaign. I'm so excited for the future of the NDP," and then blocked anyone who pointed out his Airbnb connections. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen that video of after that fire in your city, at that building that was being used as an Airbnb, or as multiple Airbnbs, and he just wouldn't answer reporters' questions about whether he felt bad about it. And it's stunning that the Alberta NDP was just like, "Yeah, that's our guy. That's he's going to win us this campaign." And NDP's housing critic too is a landlord, right? And that's not just a problem unique to the Alberta NDP. You look at the federal Liberals. I mean, Ahmed Hussein, the housing minister, is a landlord. Talib Nur Mohammed. I mean, how many millions do you make off flipping homes?
Yeah.
And so the solutions they offer reflect that. It's just, yes, give landlords more money, and then so tenants don't have to get evicted. Alberta doesn't have rent control. Like, the only form of rent control Alberta has is that a landlord can only increase your rent once a year, and they have to give you 3 months notice so you can find a new place if you don't want to pay higher rent. Like, even in Ontario, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I think Bob Rae's NDP brought in rent control, and Mike Harris's Conservatives didn't touch it because it was popular.
Yeah,
people like that. The majority of people don't own property; they're renters, like myself, and they don't like being constantly exploited by the person who owns their home, after going to work all day and being exploited by their boss.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, we could keep going for hours about this, but I think it's really interesting to like get the details about what's been going on in Alberta, because it's interesting in and of itself. But I think, like I said, what I'm really interested in is this kind of very familiar trend that we saw in Alberta that we just keep seeing play out time and time again. So it's really interesting catching up with you on this and learning about this, and as always, appreciative of the work that you do covering this issue and other issues at your Substack, The Orchard, which again I'm linking in the chat right now. Thanks again, Jeremy, for coming to talk to me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Rob. Always a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure. Yeah, we'll have you back again soon, and thanks again. We'll talk to you later.
For sure. Take care.
Alrighty. Jeremy Appel, everybody. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was really great. That was really great stuff. Any of that sound familiar? You know what I mean? It's like if you live in America, maybe you don't think it's important to pay attention to what's going on in Alberta or Canada or whatever, but I think if you live in a Western liberal democracy, wherever you are right now, you might recognize some of these very trends. You know, it might seem a little bit familiar to you. I would love to go on Big Shiny Takes again. I would be happy to. Yeah. So cheers to Jeremy for coming on the program, but of course, jeers for causing the NDP to lose. I can't support that. I cannot support that. Thank you also again to Don Dark Zoni I gave a silent thank you to some subbers over the last hour or so. Thanks to Don Dark Zoni for the 30 months tier 1 and the 5 gifted subs. Incredibly generous stuff from Don Dark Zoni. As always, very much appreciated. Thank you also to JNKD for the 27 months tier 1. Thank you, JNKD, for that. And folks, if anyone else does want to support this content, you know, I've linked Jeremy's Substack in the chat. I hope you subscribe to that. Again, I really appreciate that Jeremy does the work that Jeremy does. And if you want to support this show and this community and this kind of discussion, if you like seeing this kind of discussion on twitch.tv, please subscribe to TRRS as well. It is $5 per month. It is completely free of charge with an Amazon Prime account. You can gift subs as well, gift subscriptions to rocket right up to Twitch's only two-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. And every little bit helps. I appreciate it a lot. It's also my birthday. It's my birthday in like 3 days, and I'm not going to stream on my birthday, so we're going to have to have some week. It's going to be a whole birthday week celebration as well. So even if you don't like the community, even if you don't like the discussion, just on that level, please subscribe to TRRS because it's my birthday and it helps me out. It helps me pay for like groceries and rent, you know, and I have to feed my son. He's large, very large now. Very large. He's a very large guy and requires a lot of nuggies. So if you want to support that, please, if you can, subscribe.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old
TRRS.
to talk you through all this.
Carrier Wave, thank you so much for the gifted sub. I appreciate that, Carrier Wave. Thank you for that. Thank you. More soup for my family. That's right. My son is on the pizza roll and corn dog diet right now. I'm having a hard time getting this guy to eat more foods, you know? It's tough. It's tricky. I went for a bike ride and I feel good, but I'm not happy about it. I'm sorry to hear that. Carrier Wave. Next thing you know, you're going to be rested. You're going to get a decent night's rest. I'm not happy about that either. My kids won't eat anything that's not partially hydrogenated. Oh man, they're funny little creatures, aren't they? They're funny little creatures.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I watched 30 months of Rob and all I got was an unending love for Juche. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Biggerwig, for the 30 months of Tier 1. I'm actually impressed that the text-to-speech lady pronounced that properly. That was pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to be around here for another half an hour or so. I was late getting started, so I don't want to take off too early. But again, if you can, folks, if you can, I really enjoy doing this show, and I think it's, like we were talking about, Jeremy, I think it's important to have this perspective being broadcast. It's certainly not being broadcast in our mainstream media in Canada. So the only way that I'm able to keep doing this show is through the extremely generous support of the wonderful TRRS community members. So if you can, if possible, please subscribe to TRRS or give subs. I really appreciate it a lot. It helps a lot, and I got to make the number go up every single day. That's how it works, as you know. As you know, maybe one day I can be plugged into. Maybe one day I can be plugged into the vast left-wing network of billionaires funding the woke left-wing deep state activists, like I was saw the theory that I was seeing advanced from some of our friends in the patriotic socialist movement. Maybe one day I can be plugged into that kind of funding gravy train, but that day is not today. That day is not today. It's still all just the viewers and listeners of this channel doing the supporting. Yeah, I got to get that Tricontinental bag, seriously. But seriously, though. Seriously. Seriously. I do a good job promoting this stuff. I should get some of that, and then I wouldn't have to lean on people in the fucking chat so much. I should be part of that. Yeah, just be friends with Roger Waters. I did have a fervent defense of Roger Waters on the latest Insurgents podcast. Maybe I should send that to Roger and be like, okay, pony up, buddy. Pony up. Doon doo doo doon 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 boo doo doon 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 doon. Just like the song. So what else, folks? Definitely sing that to him. I'm just going to clip this segment. I'm going to clip this segment and send it to Roger Waters. And be like, $60K a year, please. Hey, Roger, give that Rob a loan. That's good. I like that. That's very nice. It was like the song. That's right.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Music is so badass.
Pubic Mouth. Thank you for the 10 months tier 1 from valued community member Pubic Mouth. Appreciate that. It is badass. That was good, eh, Diego? The DeSantis consultancy thing. What about give Rob a shiny diamond in the form of bits on twitch.tv?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Chaos the Gardener, thank you very much for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you very much, Chaos the Gardener. Very much appreciated. Really enjoyed that one with Jeremy Appel. It was very good. We would like some
You can count on
more
me. You're gonna have good old
donations.
Rob to talk you through all this.
That's good. Okay. Now we're cooking with gas. Talk about the oil and gas industry. Diego, thank you so much for the gifted sub. Thank you, Diego. That's just like the dang song. That's right. Have a cigar. Endowment. Give me a grant. Someone just give me a fucking grant, please. I'm busting my ass here. And you know what? Chat is busting its ass too. Keeping this stream afloat. We all deserve a break from this, okay? Someone give me a grant.
You can
For
count
God's
on me.
sakes.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
TRRS Marx TRRS Lenin TRRS Uncle Ho TRRS Che TRRS Kim TRRS Babushka TRRS Sankara Turs Hoja TRRS Parenti.
Thank you, Freelance Communist, for the 13 months of Tier 1. Thank you for that. And look, lurkers, look at all the wonderful emotes. Look at all the wonderful emotes that you have access to when you subscribe to this channel. You know, it's not just about me. It's not just about supporting me. Not only do you become part of a wonderful, dynamic community that will change your life, you also get access to all kinds of tiny little images. You get access to a bunch of tiny little images that you can use in Twitch chat.
You can count on me. You're going
You
to
know?
have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
TRRS Friendship Triangle join us.
Thank you, Pete Cicada, for the 6 months Tier 1 as well. Thank you, Pete Cicada. We got a hype train going, folks. Let's see if we can build on this. Let's see if we can build on this. We got a little bit of a hype train going, folks. So not only do you now have the opportunity to support me and the work that I do here on twitch.tv, which is hard work, frankly, you know, it's not easy to do like a 3-4 hour live show every single day, but I do it because I love to do it. Number one, I love this community and the chatters. I do think it's genuinely kind of important to have some of these conversations because, like I said, I think this kind of perspective is absent from our kind of mainstream media discourse. Don't know where I was going with that, but not only can you support that was my point. Not only can you support the work that I do here on twitch.tv, you can also get access to the wonderful TRRS emotes, be part of the community, and now you can also access these special Twitch hype train emotes as well. If that wasn't enough to convince you, which I'm sure it was.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I forgot about the funny little images. I will now slub.
Heroic Skeleton, thank you so much. Thank you, Heroic Skeleton, for the 12 months of Prime. And again, like Heroic Skeleton is showing, you don't even have to pay $5. You don't even have to pay $5. You can subscribe absolutely free of charge with your Amazon Prime account, converting to a Twitch Prime sub. Completely free. And you support me, the work I do. You join the community. You get the tiny little images. What's not to like? It's just win after win after win when you subscribe to this program. Does this have the conversation sounds? I like having those conversation sounds on top of this. So folks, we're 2 minutes away. 2 minutes away, 40% of the way through this hype train. Is there another generous chatter? Is there another generous chatter out there that wants to support the work that I do here on Twitch? Look at this wonderful vibe. Look at this wonderful vibe we're cultivating now. Doesn't that make you feel relaxed? At home? Welcome?
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Mark, thank you very much for the 100 friend coin. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for marking up the size of my account with the 100 friend coin. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else out there? Is a generous chatter out there? Does someone want to immediately...
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
The Friendship Triangle welcomes all who slub.
Thank you very much, Up the Reds, for the 16 months. Tier 1, very much appreciated. Thank you for that. Very, very much appreciated. We're 84% of the way to level 3. 1 minute to go, folks.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you
Diego,
through all
thank
this.
you. Thank you, Diego, for another gifted sub. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I slub, you slub, we all slub down here. TRRS Friendship Triangle.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Ian. 21 months of Tier 1. Very much appreciated from Ian DJ Cooper. Thank you for that. Very close, Ian, to the 24-month, highly elite, highly exclusive 2-year TRRS sub badge. So close. Thanks again, Ian, and thank you to Anonymous Gifter. Anonymous Gifter for the gifted sub. Thank you for that. Very, very kind of you, Anonymous Gifter. Very much appreciate that. The most Christ-like of all gifters, I often say. Are there any other generous chatters out there, folks? Maybe it is Brian Mason. Maybe. Maybe it is. Because remember, folks, you might think like, oh, this is like, I'm not part of this community. It'll take me so long to be rocket right up to the elite tier of the Friendship Triangle system. It's going to, how much is that? That's probably like a huge investment. It's an investment in time. It's not it's the small cost of 5 gifted subs. You can be a brand new community member. A brand new community member. And with the small price of 5 gifted subs, you immediately rocket right up to the elite tier of the Friendship Triangle system, which is not a cult. It's not a cult or a pyramid scheme. It is Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. There's a lot of Twitch channels out there. Millions. There's only one Friendship Triangle system, though. And you can immediately, it's a pay-to-play thing. You can immediately rocket right up to the top of that. And the clout does trickle down, as people in this community can attest to. People in this community can attest to this patented trickle-down clout technology. You know, anyone in the community can attest to this. And you know what else? It's an investment. Thank you. It's an investment. It's not even an investment in me. That's the tricky part, right? Sometimes it's not just investing in me. Yeah, it supports the work that I do here. Obviously, I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But it's an investment in yourself. Okay, we're all isolated. We're all alienated from one another. You know, what do we need to have? We need community. We need friendship. That's what this community brings to you. Okay? And that's not nothing. And like, I'm joking, kind of, but I'm also being serious because many people have formed genuine relationships, and I've felt this sense of community being part of the TRRS friendship triangle system that they didn't have previously.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Anonymous gifter. Be our friend. Anonymous gifter, thank you so much for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you, Anonymous gifter, for that. I really appreciate that. Whoever this wonderful anonymous gifter is, they've really been coming through lately, or maybe it's just a bunch of different people. We don't know. That's the whole thing about anonymous gifters, is that we don't know. It's investing in your own future. That's the exact thing. And now, folks, if there's one generous chatter out there, could, in theory, not only get TRRS to the sub goal today, but also trigger the very cool and exclusive TRRS 10 sub gift alert featuring nefarious tricontinental money manager Vijay Prashad. And I'm not getting into the tricontinental bucks, but I do have Vijay in my alerts. Who's a friend of the stream? Let's call it what it is. He's a friend of the stream. See if he'll come on to talk Succession. Yeah, it's unfortunate. An unfortunate and rare VJL, I must say. I'll come on the one debate that I'll do. I'll bring on Vijay Prashad and I'll take him to task in the marketplace of ideas. But his bad take on hit HBO program Succession. Anyway, the hype train's over, folks, but I am going to stick around another 10 minutes or so. I do have to go fairly soon. Oh, did he walk it back? Oh, he's so coy. He's so coy. Slub to Rib with Jeremy Appel. But seriously, I really do hope people subscribe to Jeremy's Substack, The Orchard. It's honestly I really do appreciate the journalism that Jeremy does. That's not what I want. My internet seems to have stabilized as well. I don't know what's going on with that. No, I don't want that. He says, Succession was a waste of time. Why do you think I don't like to waste my time? I mean, really, technically anything. You know, isn't that a waste? We had a good discussion over it. We had a good discourse. We enjoyed ourselves. Enjoying some a good program, a quality program is not a waste of time. What does it mean? We don't know. We don't know. It's not enough to be dominated by the super rich. We have to have fictional ones colonizing our minds. That's right. And they have to be Baby Girl and Our Friends and Swag as well. You know, I've seen that story, Gothingle Center, about the single Montreal woman holding up a 176-unit condo development so that she maintains her $400 a month rent-controlled apartment. Amazing. I know. I don't think I've talked about it enough, but it is fucking incredible. She's the only one still living there. She's like, no, I'm not leaving. If you get me an apartment for $400 a month, I'll consider it. That's so fucking cool. I love that lady. Look at my fucking arm. Jesus. This is where I'm at. I kind of look like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory with the 3/4 sleeve under t-shirt look because of my fucked up elbow. Her story is so sad yet common too. Just finally got stable housing and shit. Yeah, she's like, I'm gonna end up on the street again if I leave here, so no, I'm not leaving. And she's absolutely morally and legally correct to do so. This here from dropping too many people's elbows on jabronis. That's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. So one final plea. I know it's not everyone's favorite time of the episode, but you know I have to do it. One final plea. For anyone out there, any lurkers or people that are curious about the community or people that want to support the work that I do here on twitch.tv. I'm here every day for 3-4 hours a day, having these discussions and breaking this stuff down. If you appreciate that, if you want to keep supporting that, if you want to keep this content on the air, please, if you can, subscribe to TRRS. And one day when I get on the left wing gravy train, I'll be happy to get an actual salary, to not have to rely on people in this way. As of now, though, we got to do this. We got to do this. But look at this face. Don't you want to support this? Don't you want to support that? It's mugging now. Yeah. Well. Tough but fair. Someone think of the jabronis. What about that face? His son needs tendies. See, I don't have the commitment today. The other day I was doing the thing where I was doing the face and I was just making people uncomfortable enough that they subscribe just to move past this uncomfortable moment, but you really have to commit to it. You really have to commit to I'm gonna stare at the camera like this until someone makes me move with a donation to the program. And sometimes I just don't have it in me. Anyway, I'm gonna find someone else to raid into here. Again, it's a shorter stream than normal as well. I really appreciate the support, folks, because it is a shorter stream than normal. Again, I was busy doing 3-part harmonies when I should have been streaming and bringing you content. Thank you for watching today, folks. Thank you for watching. It was a pleasure hanging out with you today. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll try to be in a timely manner. I will be back in a timely manner tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. Thanks to Jeremy Appel for coming to talk to me today. That was a really wonderful and wide-ranging conversation with Jeremy. Sorry, Slam Dunkins. Sorry. There is still, if anyone, I know people that are just leaving, but there is still time. There's still a minute left to subscribe to the stream and support the work that I do on here if you want to. If you want to. No pressure. There is still time to do that, though. Just in theory. I'm just pointing out that there is still time for it. I think I'll just stare at the camera a little bit for the next couple seconds.